I'm 58 years old. For 23 years, I've kept silent about what we found in the waters off the Great Barrier Reef in April 2001. My name is Dr. Ellen Marsh, and I used to be a marine biologist. I spent 15 years studying reef ecosystems, publishing papers on coral bleaching and fish population dynamics, teaching undergraduate courses at James Cook University. That career ended the night we hauled something into our research vessel's holding tank that looked at me with eyes that understood exactly what we'd done to it. What I'm about to tell you happened. I have the research logs, the dive records, the equipment manifests. What I don't have anymore is the footage, the photographs, or the physical evidence. That disappeared within 72 hours of our return to port, along with any official acknowledgement that our expedition happened at all. But I was there. I saw her. And she told me the truth about why 7 divers vanished from a 12-square-mile section of reef between January and March of 2001. This is the story of how a routine investigation became the reason I can't look at the ocean the same way anymore. The Australian Maritime Safety Authority contacted me on March 28, 2001. 7 divers had vanished from the waters near Osprey Reef over a 3-month period. Osprey Reef is remote, about 80 miles off the coast of Queensland, accessible only by live-aboard dive vessels. The reef itself drops off into deep water, attracting experienced technical divers, the kind who know their equipment and their limits. The first disappearance was on January 14th. Marcus Chen, a 34-year-old dive instructor from Sydney with over 2,000 logged dives, descended to 40 meters on the reef's eastern wall and never resurfaced. His buddy reported that Marcus had signaled he was fine, then swam around a coral outcropping. When the buddy followed 30 seconds later, Marcus was gone. No body, no equipment fragments, no trace. The second was February 3rd. 2 divers this time, a married couple from Brisbane. Same location, same depth range, same reef wall. They were diving together, which meant they should have been able to help each other if something went wrong. Their dive computer data, recovered from the boat, showed normal descent profiles, then flatlined simultaneously at 38 meters. The last timestamp was 11:47 a.m. By March, 3 more divers had disappeared, all experienced, all from that same section of reef. The Australian Water Police investigated and found nothing. No signs of shark attacks, no equipment malfunctions that could be identified, no bodies recovered despite extensive search operations. The currents in that area weren't strong enough to sweep bodies away quickly. Tiger sharks were present, but tiger shark attacks leave evidence. Blood, torn wetsuits, disturbed marine life. There was none of that. The Maritime Safety Authority's theory was equipment failure combined with strong down currents. Divers could have been pulled deeper, experienced nitrogen narcosis, and drowned in water too deep for recovery operations. But I'd reviewed the data from their dive computers. The descents were controlled, the disappearances were sudden, and they all happened in a cluster zone measuring roughly 12 square miles, centered on a specific section of Osprey's eastern wall. That's why they called me. I'd spent 8 years studying that reef system, mapping coral formations, tracking fish populations, documenting seasonal migration patterns. I knew those waters. I'd dived that exact wall dozens of times, and I'd never seen anything that would explain 7 people vanishing without a trace. I assembled my report recommendations on March 30th. I suggested a week-long research expedition with underwater cameras, sonar mapping, and systematic documentation of any unusual marine activity in the target zone. The authority approved it within 48 hours and provided funding for vessel charter, equipment, and a small research team. They wanted answers before the tourist season brought more divers to the area. On April 2, 2001, I boarded the research vessel Meridian in Cairns. The boat was a 68-foot catamaran equipped with dive compressors, camera sleds, sonar arrays, and a 2,000-liter seawater holding tank we typically used for temporarily housing specimens. The crew consisted of Captain Ray Thompson, who'd been running dive charters to Osprey for 30 years, two marine biology graduate students I'd worked with before, David Ortiz and Sarah Kim, and a three-person documentary crew led by a producer named Alex Chen, who'd somehow convinced the authority to let him tag along in exchange for covering part of the expedition costs. I didn't want the documentary crew there. Research expeditions aren't performances, and having cameras present changes how people behave. But the funding was tight, and Alex's production company was paying for the underwater camera equipment we needed. So I agreed, with the condition that I had final approval over any footage used. We left Cairns Harbor at 6:00 a.m. on April 3rd. The weather was clear, seas were calm, and the forecast looked good for the entire week. It took us 9 hours to reach Osprey Reef. We anchored at 3:15 p.m. in 30 meters of water, about 200 meters from the eastern wall where the disappearances had occurred. I did a preliminary dive that afternoon with Ray, just to survey the site and plan our camera deployments. The visibility was excellent, easily 40 meters. The reef was healthy, coral coverage was dense, and fish populations looked normal. Reef sharks cruised the wall, groupers hid in crevices, schools of trevally swirled in the blue water beyond the reef edge. Everything appeared exactly as it should. But Ray noticed something I'd missed. As we swam back to the boat, he grabbed my arm and pointed upward toward the surface. I looked up and saw only our anchor line and the hull of the Meridian silhouetted against the sunlight. He signaled again, more insistent, and made a sweeping gesture around us. Back on the boat, after we'd doffed our gear, Ray said it quietly. "No dolphins, no turtles. You see any?" I hadn't, and he was right. Osprey Reef was known for its resident pod of bottlenose dolphins and the green sea turtles that fed on the reef flats. I'd never done a dive here without seeing at least one or two, but today, in perfect conditions, there'd been none. 30 years I've been coming here, Ray said. Never seen it this empty of big animals. Something's got them spooked. I logged the observation in my research notes, but didn't think much of it at the time. Marine animals move around. Maybe the dolphins were feeding elsewhere. Maybe the turtles were nesting. There could have been a dozen mundane explanations. I didn't know then that Ray had just identified the first real clue to what was happening in those waters. We spent April 4th deploying our camera array. We had 6 underwater cameras, each in a pressure-rated housing, connected to battery packs that would keep them running for 48 hours. David and Sarah dove with me to position them at different points along the eastern wall, spacing them about 50 meters apart, covering the zone where the disappearances had occurred. The cameras had motion sensors and low-light capability. If anything larger than a grouper moved within their field of view, they'd record. We aimed them outward from the reef wall toward the open ocean, figuring that if something was pulling divers away from the wall, we'd capture it on video. Alex and his crew filmed us working. They were professional enough, staying out of the way during the actual dives, but Alex kept asking questions that showed he was hoping for something dramatic. "What if it's a rogue great white?" he asked that evening. "What if there's a previously undocumented aggressive species?" I told him the likelihood of a new large predator species in these heavily studied waters was effectively zero. Great whites were rare this far north. The disappearances didn't match any known predator attack pattern. We were looking for environmental factors, equipment commonalities, or human error chains. But I was lying to myself as much as to him. 7 experienced divers don't vanish because of environmental factors, not from the same location, not without leaving any evidence. On April 5th, we retrieved the first 24 hours of camera footage. 4 of the 6 cameras had malfunctioned. Not dead batteries, not flooded housings. The recording system simply stopped working at various points during the night. The timestamp data showed they'd all quit between 2:00 a.m. and 4:00 a.m. The 2 cameras that kept functioning showed normal reef activity. A few sharks, some large groupers, a school of barracuda passing through. Nothing unusual, nothing that would cause equipment failure. Sarah checked the cameras we'd retrieved. The electronics showed no water intrusion, no obvious damage. "It's like something disrupted them," she said. "Electromagnetic interference, maybe?" I'd never heard of localized EM interference strong enough to kill camera systems 50 meters apart, but leave everything else functioning. Our boat's electronics were fine. Our dive computers had worked normally. It didn't make sense. We redeployed the cameras on April 6th, this time with additional shielding on the electronic components. I also positioned them differently, creating a tighter cluster in the sector where 3 of the divers had disappeared. If something was in that specific area, I wanted overlapping coverage. That night, April 6th, at 11:30 p.m., I was in the boat's small lab reviewing fish species data when Alex knocked on the door. He had a laptop with him and an expression I couldn't quite read. "You need to see this," he said. He'd been reviewing the footage from our second camera deployment, the one we'd just retrieved that evening. Most of it was the same as before, normal reef life, some sharks, nothing unusual. But at timestamp 3:47 a.m., one camera had captured something before its recording system failed. Alex played the clip. The camera was aimed along the reef wall, visibility reduced in the darkness despite the low light capability. For the first few seconds, nothing moved. Then, at the very edge of the frame, something passed. It was there for perhaps 2 seconds, never fully in frame, just a shape moving parallel to the reef. It was too large to be a shark, wrong body shape for a grouper. The movement was smooth, almost gliding, and at one point, just before it left the frame, I saw what might have been an arm extended outward, fingers spread. "Play it again," I said. Alex did. I watched it 5 times. The shape was humanoid. The movement was wrong for any fish species, and the way it moved its limb, if that's what it was, suggested intention, not the automatic response of a swimming animal. "Could be a diver," Alex said. "Maybe someone else is diving the site at night." "No dive boats have been here except us," I said. "Ray monitors the radio. We'd know." "Then what is it?" I didn't answer. I couldn't answer. Because the rational explanations didn't fit what I was seeing, and the irrational explanations weren't something I was ready to consider. David and Sarah reviewed the footage the next morning. David thought it might be a large ray filmed at an odd angle. Sarah said it could be a dolphin, except we hadn't seen any dolphins. Ray watched it once and walked away without commenting. That afternoon, April 7th, Alex made his proposal. We were sitting in the boat's main cabin, all 6 of us, discussing whether to continue the camera deployments or try a different approach. "We bait it," Alex said. "Whatever's down there, we draw it out." I started to object, but he continued. "We have thawed tuna on board for the crew meals. We use the blood and some chunks of fish. We run a bait line off the stern right over the target zone. If there's a predator, it'll investigate." "This isn't Shark Week," I said. "We're conducting a safety investigation, not making entertainment." 7 people are dead, Ellen. You said yourself the camera footage shows something. We need to know what it is." He wasn't wrong about that. The footage had shown something, and we were running out of time. The expedition was scheduled for 7 days, and we'd already used 5 of them with minimal results. Ray surprised me by agreeing. "I don't like it, but we're not getting answers sitting here watching cameras fail. If there's something hunting in these waters, maybe it's time to see what comes to dinner." I should have said no. I should have insisted we stick to observation-only protocols. But I'd seen that footage, and I'd counted 7 missing divers, and I wanted answers as badly as Alex did. "One night," I said, "we run the bait line tonight. If nothing happens, we pack up tomorrow and head back." We prepared the bait line that afternoon. Alex had brought several kilos of frozen tuna, which we thawed and cut into chunks. We mixed the blood with seawater in a bucket, creating a slick we could release slowly into the current. The line itself was heavy test fishing line, rated for large sharks, with multiple hooks spaced along its length. We deployed it at 9 o'clock p.m., running it off the stern, letting it sink to about 25 meters. The current would carry the scent along the reef wall, right through the zone where the disappearances had occurred. I stayed up watching. So did Ray and Alex. David and Sarah had the early morning shift, so they'd gone to sleep. The documentary crew had their cameras ready, mounted on the stern rail, night vision engaged. At 11:30 p.m., nothing had happened. The line hung slack in the water. The boat rocked gently in the calm seas. I was starting to think we'd wasted an evening when Ray stood up suddenly. "Line's moving," he said. I looked. He was right. The fishing line had gone taut, angling down and away from the boat. Not the sharp strike of a shark hitting bait, but a steady, strong pull. "Could be current," I said, but I didn't believe it. Ray started hauling in the line, hand over hand. It was heavy, resisting. About 15 meters of line came back in, then it jerked hard enough that Ray stumbled forward. "Something's on it," he said. "Something big. Alex, get your cameras ready." Alex was already filming. I moved to help Ray, grabbing the line behind him. We pulled together, gaining maybe a meter at a time. Whatever was down there wasn't fighting violently like a hooked shark would. It was resisting steadily, dead weight combined with occasional surges. We got maybe 10 more meters of line in when the boat suddenly lurched to port. Not a wave, not wind. Something had pulled the stern sideways. "We need to cut it," I said. "This is too much weight. It's going to capsize us." "Hold on," Ray said. He'd grabbed a gaff hook. 5 more meters, let's see what we've got." We pulled. My hands burned from the line. The boat tilted further. Then suddenly the resistance stopped. The line went slack for a moment, then taut again, but lighter now. "It's coming up," Ray said. We hauled faster. The water off the stern began to churn. I saw shapes in the darkness, something breaking the surface, then submerging again. "Net!" Ray shouted. "We need the net!" Alex dropped his camera and grabbed the large research net we used for specimen collection, a reinforced mesh net with a 2-meter opening. He lowered it into the water off the port side while Ray and I kept hauling the line. Whatever was on the line surfaced 6 feet from the boat. In the deck lights I saw skin, gray-blue, slick with water. I saw an arm reaching upward, fingers spread, trying to grab the hull. "Get the net under it!" Ray yelled. Alex plunged the net deeper, then scooped upward. Something tangled in the mesh, thrashing now. We hauled the net up together, all 3 of us pulling until we got it over the rail and onto the deck. It hit the deck hard, seawater spilling everywhere. For a moment, none of us moved. We just stared. It was humanoid, approximately 6 feet long, maybe slightly less. Gray-blue skin, smooth, no scales. The torso was elongated, narrower than a human's. The arms were proportional but ended in hands with webbed fingers, the webbing extending to the first knuckle. The legs, if they were legs, merged into a tail structure, not a fishtail like the mermaids in storybooks, but something more like a fused limb covered in the same smooth skin. The face was what stopped my breath. It was human enough to be recognizable, alien enough to be wrong. Eyes larger than human eyes, positioned slightly more lateral. No visible nose, just 2 slits above a mouth that was too wide. The skull was elongated backward, hydrodynamic. She opened her eyes. They were dark, nearly black, no visible white. And she looked directly at me. I saw intelligence in those eyes. I saw awareness. And I saw rage. "Jesus Christ," Alex whispered. "What is it?" Ray moved first. He grabbed a tarp and threw it over her, cutting off our view. "Get it in the tank," he said. "Now, before someone gets hurt." We dragged her, still tangled in the net, across the deck to the holding tank. The tank was built into the boat's port side, accessible from the deck. 2,000 liters of constantly circulated seawater we used for studying fish specimens. It was 2 meters long, 1.5 meters wide, maybe 1 meter deep. Too small for what we'd caught. We lifted her over the edge and into the water. She sank immediately, the net still partially wrapped around her. Through the reinforced viewing port on the side of the tank, I watched her twist and pull until she'd freed herself from the mesh. Then she floated there, vertical in the water, and stared out at us through the glass. Ray turned to Alex. "Whatever you just filmed, it doesn't exist. Understand?" Alex nodded slowly, his face pale. I knelt by the viewing port. She was still watching me. Her chest moved, gills on her neck opening and closing. She was breathing. She was alive, and we'd just pulled her out of her home and trapped her in a tank barely large enough for her to turn around. "What do we do now?" Sarah had appeared on deck, woken by the noise. She looked from the tank to me, waiting for me to make a decision. I should have said we release her immediately. I should have said we pretend this never happened. Instead, I said, we keep her for 24 hours. We document everything, then we decide. That was the choice I'll regret for the rest of my life. I didn't sleep. None of us did. We sat in the main cabin, lights low, drinking coffee that had gone cold hours ago, trying to process what was in the holding tank 10 feet away. Ray had taken the first watch, sitting on deck beside the tank, making sure she didn't somehow escape or that she didn't die before we figured out what to do with her. Alex had already uploaded his footage to 3 separate encrypted cloud storage accounts. "Just in case," he said. "If something happens to the physical drives, this exists somewhere." "If something happens?" David asked. "What's going to happen?" I'd been thinking about that. About what happens when you catch something that isn't supposed to exist. About the research vessels that had reported unusual sonar contacts in the past. Contacts that disappeared from official records. About the marine biologists I'd known who'd found anomalous remains and had their samples confiscated by government agencies they'd never heard of. "We need to be smart about this," I said. "No external communication until we're back in port. No radio calls, no satellite internet, nothing. If word gets out that we have this, we won't be the ones deciding what happens next." Sarah looked at me. "You think someone would take it from us?" "I think 7 divers disappeared from these waters in 3 months. I think we just caught something that might explain why, and I think if the wrong people find out, we'll never see it again." At 4:30 a.m. I went up on deck. Ray was still there, sitting on a equipment box, staring at the tank. The creature, she, was visible through the viewing port, floating motionless in the water. "She hasn't moved in an hour," Ray said. "Just floats there, watching." I knelt by the viewing port. She shifted position immediately, her eyes tracking me. Up close, through the glass, I could see more details. Her skin wasn't uniformly gray-blue. It had subtle patterns. Darker patches along her sides and back, lighter along her front. Protective coloration, like a dolphin or shark. Her hands rested at her sides, fingers spread. The webbing between them was translucent, showing fine blood vessels. "Ray," I said quietly, "you've been diving these waters for 30 years. Have you ever seen anything like this before?" He was silent for a long time. Then, "Stories. Old stories from the islanders, from the Kanak people in New Caledonia, from fishermen in Papua New Guinea. Things in the deep water that looked like people but weren't. Things that would take divers who went too deep or stayed too long. I always figured it was just tales, you know, ways to explain drownings to keep people from taking stupid risks. But I've seen things over the years that didn't add up. Equipment failures in specific areas, dive computers that would glitch for no reason. That time in '94 when a whole pod of pilot whales beached themselves at Osprey for no reason anyone could explain. And the dolphins, Ellen. The dolphins don't come here anymore. They used to be everywhere. Now they avoid this whole section of reef." I watched her through the glass. She watched back. "We can't keep her," I said. "This tank is too small. She can barely move." "I know. But Alex is going to want to study her. He's already talking about bringing in specialists, getting tissue samples, mapping her DNA. She's not a specimen. Tell him that." Alex appeared on deck at 5:15 a.m., carrying his camera and a notepad. "I want to try something," he said. "Communication attempt. See if she responds to sounds, gestures, anything." "She's been in that tank for 3 hours," I said. She's probably terrified. All the more reason to try to communicate. If she's intelligent, if she understands we're not going to hurt her, maybe she'll calm down. I didn't think she would calm down. We'd yanked her out of the ocean with a hook and net, trapped her in a tank, and kept her under bright lights, surrounded by creatures she probably saw as threats, or food, or both. But Alex was right about one thing. If she was intelligent, we needed to know. "Fine," I said, "but keep your distance. Don't put your hands near the tank." Alex set up his camera on a tripod aimed at the viewing port, then knelt in front of the glass. She shifted immediately, moving to face him directly. "Can you understand me?" Alex said clearly. No response. She floated, watching. Alex raised his hand and waved. She didn't react. He tried knocking on the glass, a simple rhythm. 3 taps, pause, 3 taps, nothing. "This isn't working," David said. He'd come up with Sarah, both of them watching from the rail. Then she moved. She raised her right hand and tapped the glass from inside. 3 times. Pause. 3 times. Exactly matching Alex's rhythm. "Oh my God," Sarah whispered. Alex knocked again, a different pattern. 4 quick taps, pause, 2 slow taps. She repeated it perfectly. "She understands," Alex said. "She's responding. This is communication." "This is pattern matching," I said. "Parrots can do that. It doesn't mean she understands meaning." But I didn't believe what I was saying. The way she watched us, the way she'd responded immediately to Alex's knock, the deliberateness of her movements. This wasn't a trained animal performing tricks. This was someone trying to interact. Alex spent the next hour trying different things. Hand signals, which she didn't respond to. Speaking slowly, which produced no reaction. Writing words on a whiteboard and holding it up to the glass, which she looked at but didn't acknowledge. Then he tried something else. He pulled up an audio file on his laptop, a recording of dolphin vocalizations from a previous project. He played it through a small speaker held near the glass. She reacted instantly. Her body language changed, becoming more alert. She moved closer to the glass, her head tilted, listening. When the recording stopped, she made a sound. It came from somewhere in her throat or chest, a low-frequency click, almost like sonar. Then another, slightly different in pitch. "She's trying to respond," Sarah said. "Play it again." Alex replayed the dolphin sounds. She listened, then produced her own sequence of clicks and low tones. It wasn't random. It had structure, phrasing, like language. "We need an underwater speaker," I said. "If she's using sound to communicate, she needs to hear us properly, and we need to hear her clearly. Sound travels differently in water." We had an underwater speaker, part of our equipment for studying fish responses to sonar. Ray retrieved it from storage and mounted it on the inside of the tank, connected to Alex's laptop. We also dropped in a waterproof microphone so we could record her sounds clearly. Alex played the dolphin vocalizations again through the underwater speaker. The clarity was immediate. She responded with a longer sequence of clicks and tones, her body oriented toward the speaker. "She's talking to us," Alex said. "We just need to figure out what she's saying." I sat down by the viewing port. She was still watching me, not Alex, not the speaker, me. "Why divers?" I said. "Is that what you want to know? Why we're asking about the missing divers?" She didn't respond to my voice, but I saw something change in her expression, a subtle shift that I couldn't quite interpret. I pulled out my phone and found a photo I'd saved from the investigation briefing. Marcus Chen, the first missing diver, smiling in his wetsuit on a boat deck. I held the phone up to the glass. Her reaction was immediate and unmistakable. She moved backward in the tank, as far from the glass as she could get. Her mouth opened, showing teeth I hadn't seen before, triangular, shark-like. The sound she made was sharp, aggressive. "She recognizes him," Ray said quietly. "Or she recognizes what he represents." I lowered the phone. She stayed at the back of the tank, her body language defensive now. "The divers," I said, more to myself than to anyone else. "She knows what happened to them. She was there, or her people were there." Alex was already typing on his laptop. "We need to establish a communication protocol. Build a vocabulary. If we can teach her to understand specific sounds or patterns, we can ask questions. We can find out what happened." "We don't have time for that," Ray said. "We've got maybe 18 hours before we have to make a decision about what to do with her. You want to teach her English in 18 hours? I want to try." I stayed by the tank while the others went to plan their approach. The sun was coming up, light spreading across the water. She'd moved back to the center of the tank, floating upright again, watching me. I thought about the missing divers, about Marcus Chen signaling he was fine, then disappearing 30 seconds later, about the married couple whose dive computers flatlined simultaneously, about the complete absence of bodies, of equipment, of any physical evidence. "What did they do to you?" I said quietly. "The divers. What did they do?" She didn't respond, but she didn't look away either. At 2:47 a.m. on April 8th, something hit our bait line. I was below deck trying to sleep and failing when Ray's shout brought me running. By the time I reached the stern, Ray and Alex were already hauling in line, both of them struggling with the weight. "It's not a shark," Ray said through gritted teeth. "Sharks fight different. This is pulling steady, like it knows what it's doing." I grabbed the line behind them. The braided fishing line cut into my palms even through my gloves. Whatever was down there had significant mass and wasn't panicking. A hooked shark would be thrashing, running, trying to break free. This felt controlled, almost like whatever was on the other end was choosing to resist rather than escape. We pulled together, gaining maybe half a meter at a time. The boat's stern lights reflected off the dark water, showing nothing but our anchor line and the taut bait line angling down into the depths. David appeared on deck with a spotlight, sweeping it across the surface. "There," he said, pointing. "Something's breaking the surface." I looked where he indicated and saw a disturbance in the water about 10 meters off the stern. Not splashing, not the chaotic turbulence of a fighting fish. Just smooth movement, something large moving just below the surface. Then the boat lurched hard to port. The sudden shift nearly threw me into the rail. Ray lost his grip on the line, and it started running back out, burning through his gloves as he tried to recapture it. "Cut it!" I shouted. "We're going to capsize!" 10 more meters, Ray said. He'd regained his hold on the line. "I want to see what this is." I should have insisted. I should have grabbed a knife and cut the line myself. Instead, I helped him pull. The boat tilted further. Water sloshed over the port rail. Sarah had come up from below and was hanging onto the cabin doorframe, her eyes wide. Alex had abandoned the line and grabbed his camera, filming everything. "Ray," I said, "we have to cut it." Then the resistance stopped. The line went slack so suddenly that we all stumbled backward. For a moment I thought whatever was on the hook had broken free. Then the line snapped taut again, but lighter now, less weight. "It's coming up," Ray said. "Fast. Get the net ready." David dropped the spotlight and grabbed our research net, the heavy reinforced mesh we used for collecting large fish specimens. The net had a 2-meter opening and could theoretically hold several hundred kilograms. We'd used it to catch reef sharks for tagging studies. I kept hauling line with Ray. My shoulders burned, my hands were numb, but we were gaining line quickly now. Whatever was coming up wasn't resisting anymore. The water off the stern began churning. I saw movement, something dark breaking the surface, then submerging. David positioned the net, ready to scoop. "Now!" Ray shouted. Something surfaced 6 feet from the boat. In the deck lights, I saw skin, not scales, skin. Gray-blue, smooth, reflecting the light with an almost metallic sheen. I saw an arm, reaching upward out of the water, fingers spread, trying to grab the boat's hull. The hand had 5 fingers. They were webbed. "Get the net under it!" Ray was yelling, but his voice sounded distant. David plunged the net down and scooped. I heard him grunt with effort as he lifted. Whatever was in the net wasn't fighting, just dead weight. We all grabbed the net's edges and hauled together, pulling it up and over the rail. It hit the deck with a wet thud. Seawater streamed off the mesh, pooling around our feet. For several seconds, none of us moved. We just stared at what we'd caught. She was approximately 6 feet long from head to the end of her tail structure. The tail wasn't like anything I'd seen on marine animals I'd studied. It wasn't a fish tail, not the horizontal flukes of a dolphin or the vertical fin of a shark. It was more like fused legs, still showing the shape of 2 limbs but covered in the same smooth gray-blue skin as her torso, tapering to a point. Her torso was humanoid, narrow waist, defined rib structure visible beneath the skin, shoulders that looked functional for swimming. The arms were proportional to her body, ending in those webbed hands. 5 fingers on each, the webbing extending to the first knuckle. The fingers were longer than human fingers, more delicate. But it was her face that made my hands start shaking. The skull was elongated, more hydrodynamic than a human skull, but the features were recognizable. Eyes positioned forward, suggesting binocular vision. A mouth, currently closed. The nose was just 2 slits above the mouth, flush with the face. No external ears, just small holes on the sides of her head. She opened her eyes. They were large, positioned slightly more lateral than human eyes, giving her a wider field of vision. The irises were dark, nearly black, with no visible sclera, and they focused on me immediately. I saw awareness in those eyes. Not the blank stare of a fish, not the instinctive wariness of a wild animal. Something that looked at me and understood what I was. Her mouth opened slightly, showing teeth. They were triangular, pointed, arranged in rows like a shark's teeth, but smaller, more numerous. She made a sound, a low-frequency vocalization that I felt in my chest more than heard. "Jesus Christ," Alex whispered. He'd lowered his camera, just staring. "What is it?" Ray moved first. He grabbed a tarp from the equipment locker and threw it over her, cutting off our view. "Stop looking and start moving," he said. "We need to get it in the tank before it dies or someone gets bitten." The tarp helped somehow, making it easier to treat what we'd caught as cargo rather than a person. We dragged her, still partially tangled in the net, across the deck to the holding tank. The tank was built into the boat's port side, a 2,000-liter system we'd used for temporarily housing fish specimens during research projects. It was 2 meters long, 1.5 meters wide, about 1 meter deep. The water inside was seawater, pumped and filtered continuously from the ocean around us. We lifted her over the tank's edge. She was heavier than she looked, probably 70 or 80 kilograms. When we lowered her into the water, she sank immediately, the tarp and net dragging her down. Through the reinforced viewing port on the tank's side, I watched her struggle free. She twisted in the water, pulling at the net, her movements fluid and controlled despite the confined space. After maybe 30 seconds, she'd freed herself completely. The net and tarp drifted to the tank's bottom. She oriented herself upright in the water, her tail moving in small adjustments to maintain position. Then she looked out through the viewing port, directly at me. Her chest moved. I could see it rising and falling. On her neck, just below where her jaw met her throat, gill slits opened and closed rhythmically. She was breathing the water, processing oxygen from it the same way a fish would. But she wasn't a fish. The intelligence in her eyes, the way she held herself, the deliberate way she was examining us through the glass, this was something else entirely. Ray turned to Alex. "Whatever footage you have, it doesn't exist. You understand me? That camera gets locked up, and we don't talk about what's in this tank until we figure out what the hell we're doing." Alex nodded, but I saw him glance at his camera bag. The footage was already uploaded, backed up, distributed across cloud servers. Even if we destroyed every physical copy, it existed somewhere. Sarah had come up on deck. She looked at the tank, at the creature floating inside, and her face went pale. "That's not possible," she said quietly. "Aquatic humanoids, convergent evolution to that degree, it's not possible." "It's in the tank," David said. "Seems pretty possible to me." I was still kneeling by the viewing port. She was still watching me. Her expression, if that's what it was, hadn't changed. Not aggressive, not fearful, just watching. "What do we do now?" Sarah asked, looking at me. I should have said we release her immediately. I should have insisted we were out of our depth, that we had no right to keep her trapped in a tank barely large enough for her to turn around. I should have remembered that 7 people had disappeared from these waters, and maybe there was a good reason for that. Instead, I said, "We keep her for 24 hours. We document everything we can. Then we decide what to do next." That was the decision that still wakes me up at night, 23 years later. Because in that moment, looking at something that shouldn't exist trapped in a research tank, I chose science over compassion. I chose answers over ethics. And she knew it. I could see it in her eyes as she floated there, watching me through the glass. She knew exactly what I'd decided and what it meant for her. I sat watch beside the tank while the others went below to rest. It was 4:00 a.m. The deck lights created pools of yellow illumination that made the darkness beyond seem deeper. She floated vertically in the center of the tank, motionless except for the small movements of her tail that kept her upright. The tank was too small. I'd known it the moment we lowered her in, but seeing her now, unable to swim properly, unable to do anything but hover in place, made it worse. We'd designed this system for reef fish, for specimens we'd keep for a few hours while we took measurements and tissue samples, not for something her size, not for something that might be intelligent. She shifted position slightly, her eyes still tracking me. I'd been sitting here for 20 minutes, and she hadn't looked away once. Not the vacant stare of a fish, but focused attention. I pulled my laptop from my equipment bag and opened the file with the dive incident reports. 7 divers, 7 disappearances over 3 months. I read through them again, looking for patterns I might have missed. Marcus Chen, January 14th. Last seen swimming around a coral outcropping at 40 meters. His buddy followed 30 seconds later. Empty water. The married couple, February 3rd. Diving together, experienced, good air management. Both dive computers stopped recording simultaneously at 38 meters. No distress signals. 3 more in March, all in the same general area, all experienced, all at depth, all vanished without any physical evidence left behind. I looked up at the tank. She was still watching me. "Did you see them?" I said quietly. "The divers. Were you there?" No response. She floated, her gills opening and closing steadily. I thought about what Ray had said. Stories from the islanders about things in the deep water that looked like people but weren't. Things that would take divers who went too deep or stayed too long. I'd dismissed those as folklore, the kind of cautionary tales every maritime culture developed to explain drownings and to keep people respectful of the ocean's dangers. But sitting here, looking at her, I wondered what else I'd dismissed as folklore that might have been observation. At 5:30 a.m., Ray came back on deck with 2 cups of coffee. He handed me one and sat down on the equipment box next to the tank. "She moved at all?" "No, just watching." Ray looked through the viewing port. She shifted slightly to track him, then returned her attention to me. "Why you think?" "What?" "She keeps looking at you specifically. Alex tried to interact with her earlier, David too. She looked at them, but she keeps coming back to you. Why?" I didn't have an answer. Maybe it was random. Maybe I'd been the first face she'd seen clearly when we pulled her onto the deck. Maybe she recognized that I was the one who'd made the decision to keep her. "We can't keep her long," Ray said. "Even if we wanted to, this tank isn't big enough. She'll die in here." "I know. So what's the plan? We document her, then what? Release her? Turn her over to authorities, try to study her?" "I don't know yet." Ray was quiet for a moment. Then, When I was younger, maybe 25, I was diving off New Caledonia. Night dive, just me and one other guy. We were at about 30 meters, and I saw something in my light beam. Just for a second. Something with hands, swimming away from us into the dark. I told myself it was a seal, even though there are no seals in those waters. I told myself I'd seen it wrong, that it was a trick of the light and nitrogen narcosis. Why are you telling me this? Because I've been lying to myself for 33 years about what I saw, and you're about to start lying too if you haven't already. We're going to tell ourselves this is science, that we're documenting an unknown species, that we're expanding human knowledge. But that's not what this is. Then what is it? Ray looked at the tank. We caught someone, not something. Someone. And we need to decide if we're the kind of people who keep someone in a cage. He left me alone with that thought. The sky was starting to lighten in the east, the stars fading. She continued to watch me through the glass. At 6:15 a.m., Alex came up with his equipment. He'd brought the underwater speaker and microphone, along with his laptop and recording gear. I want to try communication again, he said. We got a response yesterday with the dolphin sounds. Maybe we can build on that. I didn't object. If we were keeping her, and apparently we were, at least for now, then attempting communication was less cruel than just leaving her trapped with no interaction. Alex set up the equipment, mounting the underwater speaker inside the tank and positioning the waterproof microphone. She watched him work, her body language subtly changing, not aggressive but more alert. He played the dolphin vocalization recording through the underwater speaker. She responded immediately, producing a sequence of clicks and low-frequency tones that the microphone captured clearly. The sounds had structure, variation in pitch and rhythm that suggested complexity. That's not random, Alex said, reviewing the waveform on his laptop. Look at the pattern. She's responding to specific frequencies and the dolphin calls with specific frequencies of her own. He played the recording again. She produced a different sequence this time, shorter, with a distinct pattern of 3 clicks followed by a sustained tone. She's varying her response, I said. That suggests she's trying different things to communicate, not just mimicking. Alex spent the next hour playing different sounds through the speaker. Whale songs, which she responded to with interest. Human speech, which produced no response. Recorded reef sounds, which she seemed to ignore. And then he tried something different. He played a recording of sonar pings, the kind research vessels use for mapping. Her reaction was immediate and unmistakable. She moved backward in the tank as far as she could go, her body language defensive. She made a sharp, aggressive sound, teeth showing. She doesn't like that, I said. Stop it! Alex paused the recording. She stayed at the back of the tank, tense. Interesting, Alex said. Active sonar causes distress. That suggests she's sensitive to it. Maybe it's painful or disorienting. Or it suggests she associates it with danger, I said. Research vessels use sonar. Dive boats use it. Maybe she's learned that sonar means humans nearby. Sarah had joined us on deck. She'd brought her own laptop and was reviewing the audio recordings Alex had made. These vocalizations have syntax, she said. I'm not saying it's language, not yet, but there's structured variation here. She's not just making noise. Can we build a communication system? Alex asked. Assign meanings to specific sounds, teach her to respond to questions? In 24 hours? No. Maybe in 24 months, if we had proper facilities, a team of linguists, animal behavior specialists, but not in a day. I was still watching her through the viewing port. She'd moved back to the center of the tank, but her body language remained guarded. What if we show her things instead? I said. Images. See if she recognizes them or responds. Alex pulled up photos on his laptop. We started simple. Images of fish she might recognize. A grouper, which produced no response. A reef shark, which she looked at but didn't react to. A dolphin, which made her lean closer to the glass examining it.